This is the content. This is what I want to try and cover here. I want to look a bit at Huntsville's past, what's happened up until today, to bring it into the kind of size and the systems that go on here. Then also answer the question, who were the flying monkeys, which is on everybody's lips. I know. What are these things? And then look on today, Huntsville today. Some of you've probably seen Will's brilliant little movie that he made to advertise the conference, and I stole some of the stuff from there and put it into a quick presentation. And then we're going to be looking at the US global system, military system, US global domination, which we can call the Phantom Menace, if any of you Star Wars fans out there. And then look at the people striking back. What's our response to this? It's a huge thing that we're fighting against, but there are a lot of us around the world fighting against it, and together, hopefully, we can make change. So this is 1941. Redstone Ordnance Factory became a $47 million chemical weapons center. Phosgene and mustard gas weapons were produced and stockpiled here in Huntsville. So in 1943, the ordnance plant was renamed Redstone Arsenal, and over 27 million chemical munitions items were produced, and 45,200,000 ammunition shells were loaded. So also in 1943, Redstone Army Airfield was established to test devices for firebombing Japanese cities. In 1949, the Ordnance Rocket Center was opened, and Redstone Arsenal became the center of research and development for free-flight rockets. In 1950, about 1,000 personnel transferred to Redstone from Fort Bliss in Texas, including 200 German scientists and engineers, led by Werner von Braun, to form the Ordnance Guided Missile Center, or OGMC. The German scientists came originally from Hitler's V2 rocket program at Peenemünde in Germany. The V2 rockets were manufactured at Mittelwerk, a series of tunnels dug out of a hill at Konstein. Towards the end of World War II, the Mittelwerk underground V2 factory used forced labor from the Mittelbau Dora concentration camp. This is Werner von Braun with Nazi officers in 1945. He visited Mittelwerk in 1944. This is him with American officials when they transferred to the United States. And as Tom Lehrer said, once the rockets go up, who cares where they come down? That's not my department, says Werner von Braun. It's estimated that V2 rockets killed something like 2,541 and injured approximately 5,923 people during the Second World War. But something like 20,000 people died at Mittelbau Dora or soon after the war, including 1,300 to 1,500 that were killed by British bombs. 350 were hanged, including 200 for sabotage. Many of the workers there tried to sabotage the work. They knew what it was about. They were hung. Many others died from exhaustion or cold, malnutrition or disease, and others were murdered by guards. The US intelligence and military extracted scientists from Germany at the end of World War II by Colonel Holger Toftoy through a secret operation codenamed Operation Paperclip. Without State Department approval, their work for Hitler's Third Reich disqualified them from officially obtaining visas. I should also mention that some of the other scientists that didn't come to the US were captured by the Soviet Union and taken to Russia. So both of the opposing kind of build-up in Cold War was initiated from Nazi Germany, either from Russia or from the United States. So these were then assigned, the people who came to the States were assigned to the centre at Huntsville, where they settled and raised families. As the Korean War started, the OGMC was given the mission to develop what eventually became the Redstone rocket. This rocket was to set the stage for America's space program, as well as major Army missile programs as well, to be centered at Huntsville. This is the rocket. Toftoy, then a brigadier general, commanded OGMC and the overall Redstone arsenal. In early 1956, the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, the ABMA, under Major General John Nidaris, was formed. And von Braun was appointed chief of the Guided Missile Development Division. The Redstone rocket was deployed by NATO as a short-range ballistic missile in West Germany from 1958 to 1964. It was also the first missile to carry a live nuclear warhead. Von Braun was present at the 1958 launch and high-altitude detonation in the hardtack-teak Pacific Ocean test. In 1958, the Army Ballistic Missile Agency was placed under the new Army Ordnance Missile Command, or AOMC, and in 1960, the AOMC space-related missions and most of its employees, facilities and equipment were transferred to NASA. This is the transfer ceremony that took place then. And this formed the George C. Marshall Space Flight Center, or MSFC. Von Braun was named as its director. The Redstone family was developed during the 1950s and 1960s. The Jupiter and Mercury rockets and Pershing missile derived from the original Redstone rocket. As a director of the MSFC, von Braun oversaw the development of the Saturn V or Saturn V rocket that eventually carried men to the moon. But not before many experiments to discover the effects of spaceflight on astronauts. These experiments involved placing animals on rockets, which brings us to the next part of the story, the flying monkeys. Many of you will remember the animals that were sent up. There were mice, there were rats, there was a dog. The Russians sent a dog, Laika, first to orbit the Earth. The Americans sent some of these, but also monkeys. So I think we should say a few words about the monkeys. They gave their lives for space research. This was Albert I, the unsung space hero, the first ever primate astronaut. He was a rhesus monkey. He was launched in 1948 and rode to over 39 miles on a Redstone V2 rocket, but he suffocated during the flight. Unfortunately, in the early stages of these experiments, they didn't worry too much about whether the animals came back or not. This is Albert II in 1949. He made it to 82 miles up and actually made it into space, into outer space. There were a series of rockets containing Alberts 3 to 6 who were also launched, but unfortunately none of them survived. They did try to keep them alive, but the parachutes didn't open or the landings didn't work quite right, so they all unfortunately perished. But then, in 1959, two monkeys, Abel, a rhesus monkey, and Miss Baker, a squirrel monkey, flew a successful mission on a Redstone Jupiter rocket and were actually recovered alive. Unfortunately, Abel died during surgery to remove a medical electrode, and Baker became the first monkey to survive spaceflight and subsequent medical procedures. So let's hear it from Miss Baker. I believe she went on to have a couple of husbands and quite a good life in the end, so good for her. So let's look at Huntsville's dark side now. Many of you come from Huntsville, I know, some of you anyway, so you know this already, but it's a surprise to me to see how much concentration of missile technology there was in just one place. So Redstone remains the center for the US Army's missile programs. It's home to the US Army Materiel Command, the US Army Aviation and Missile Life Cycle Management Command, the Tactical UAV Project Office. Also, the Redstone Test Center, the Missile Defense Agency, the Missile and Space Intelligence Center, and many other operations. Also in Huntsville, we have Raytheon, which has a $100 million manufacturing site for the SM-3 missile. You heard, well, we'll talk about the SM-3 a bit. Versions of the SM-3 are used in missile defense systems of the US and NATO in Europe to help encircle Russia. And they're also used on Aegis missile defense ships in the Mediterranean and the Pacific, and in the Aegis Ashore site in Romania, currently based in Romania. Another one is due to be installed in Poland fairly soon. So this is the use of the systems in Europe. You can see the radar sites. Oh, some of the colour, you can't see the you can't see everything. There should be a map under all that. I don't quite know why you can't see it. But the radar sites are actually, the one at the top is in the top of Norway, Vardø in Norway. There's also a radar site in Fylingdales, near where I live, near where me and Lindis Percy live, in Yorkshire in England. And there's also a radar site in Turkey, early warning system there too. You can see the two Aegis ashore sites at Poland and Romania, and the Aegis ships patrolling, you can't see this very well, but the Mediterranean and also the Baltic region around Europe. So if we could see the map, you'd see how this encircled the borders of Russia, basically. Oh, you saw it then very briefly as it went off. Also nearby here in Troy, Lockheed Martin manufactures, assembles and tests the interceptor missile used in the THAAD missile defense system. And the US is deploying THAAD in Guam, South Korea. Japan and Taiwan have systems yet to come, but will undoubtedly be hosting them too in the Pacific. And this is where they are deployed in the Pacific region. You can see they cluster around China, in fact. And there's more. Also in Huntsville, we can see that it receives $7 billion of federal military spending every year. It also hosts, because it hosts many aerospace corporations. So, for example, Boeing, General Dynamics, General Atomics, Mantech, KBR-Weil, Northrop Grumman, Leidos, SAIC, SNC, Camber, and AV Aerospace companies all operate from Huntsville. And all are involved in this global operation of the military, the US military, to encircle the Earth. We'll have seen many of these operate through, when we heard the news about the cruise missile attack on Syria, many of these companies will have been involved in that kind of attack. And certainly military space operations will have been involved too. It's time to convert then these companies to the production of more useful things and not to fuel the next stage in the presentation, which is the US global control, the phantom menace. Some of you will be familiar with the US Space Command's Vision 2020, where it had this statement: US Space Command dominating the space dimension of military operations to protect US interests and investment, integrating space forces into warfighting capabilities across the full spectrum of conflict. Full spectrum dominance, it became known as, or it has become known as. So the goal of US full spectrum dominance, military superiority on land, at sea, in the air, in space, and of information. And as a consequence of this, our Earth, that little planet that we live on, is surrounded by satellites, hundreds of satellites. Many of them are being used by or run for the military. The military uses them for a number of different operations: surveillance, communication, global positioning, missile targeting and guidance, drone operation, missile defense systems, and many more. These are just a few of the operations. We'll have a look at a look at each of those in turn. There's a lot of information here, but I'm going to put this on the website, so if you don't get it all at one go, you can have another chance. A number of ground-based stations have been established around the world for tracking satellites and other space objects. These are done with high-powered radars, like the one on the right there. That's at Fylingdales in Yorkshire, or through very high-powered optical telescopes, which are also used to try to identify what those space objects are. And those space objects will be orbiting the Earth in different orbits. There are also a huge number of spy bases for electronic interception, for hacking into other people's electronic communication systems, and gaining information for the US military. The most famous ones are possibly here: Pine Gap in the centre of Australia, right in the middle of Australia in the desert; Sugar Grove in West Virginia; then there's Waihopai in New Zealand, and Misawa in Japan, Menwith Hill in the UK, Lurkill in Sweden. These are just some of the many network of spy bases around the world. And also, of course, the cyber warfare activities. This is just a snapshot of the kind of cyber warfare activities that go on at any one time around the world, many of them either coming from or targeted to the United States and, of course, China, but also around the world. And there's a space-based surveillance system, or SBSS, to ensure, I quote, space superiority through situational awareness. That is, understanding everything that's going on around them in space in order to see what's going on around them on the Earth, and to be ready to react to any particular situation that may come up. You can see the logos there, Master of Space, and various Space Command logos that are associated with this particular part of the global system. Satellite communication networks have been set up for the command and control of everything, everywhere, and anytime, including the MUOS, the Multiple User Operation System. We went to Sicily, was it last year? I think it was last year, just to help to encourage, to support the local opposition to the system there, which is one of a global network system of relaying information. This allows individual soldiers to have direct communication with commanders and with other operating systems within this global military network. Missile defense systems, which Will has already talked about, these will deny retaliation and possibly enable a first nuclear strike by US forces. They're positioned around the world too, as we've seen. Drones are used for surveillance, and they're piloted remotely to spy and deliver death from thousands of miles away. We've all become far too familiar with these. But also they're going to be used possibly in the future for missile defense, where they can loiter at high altitudes to detect and perhaps knock out missiles during their early boost phase with a high-powered solid-state laser. That's the current plan for the use of drones. There are also experimental technologies, hypersonic, many times the speed of sound, intercontinental cruise missiles, and so-called scam jets being developed in order to enable this idea of a prompt global strike, a strike anywhere on the earth within 60 minutes. And so there are also secret unmanned space planes being launched and tested. One has been in space now for over a year before it was landed again. And there are many other operations that we don't hear about because they're secret. And there are other new space weapons projects which could be with us soon. We've already heard how new President Trump has decided that space weapons may be another area to investigate, to bring back into operation. Plenty to be scared about, basically. So, I think just to close, it will be worth looking at the opposition to these things around the world. I mentioned already that wherever the military operates, so in Syria at the moment, many of these systems will be operating, on red alert. They'll be very, all systems go in all of those kinds of operations that we see the military activity in. They will be trying to work out what the Russian response is, what the China response is, what's happening in North Korea, all of those things, as well as planning possible other attacks. So there's a heck of a lot to all of these systems. But everywhere, my hope is that everywhere I see these places where these things are either being built or operated from, we see a local opposition. We see people who, despite the propaganda that they're fed, see through that and recognize that this is in fact endangering the planet, endangering Earth, endangering life on the planet. And they're not prepared to be part of that. So I'm going to run this next bit through. I hope there's supposed to be a soundtrack. Let's hope the music comes through as well. And just to finish off with this. Soundtrack, let's hope the music comes through as well. And just to finish off with this.